Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee, and today I am delighted to be in conversation with my next guest, a Brooklyn, New York-based journalist and critic who's written about art, design, urbanism, and media culture for a number of international publications. He is the editor-in-chief at Dwell magazine. Please welcome William Hanley. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Rob, how's it going? Good to see you. And yeah, I go by Bill mostly.
Bill it is. Bill and Rob's Excellent Adventure. Can we do that? No?
Sure.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So, thank you for making the time to come on here. And I'm glad we're able to, have this happen. I mean, we were chatting a little bit, and I mentioned that brief conversation that you and I had a while back. I was like, man, major people actually know about my podcast. I was like, I can't wait to talk to Bill. This is going to be great. So, before we get into like the main crux of the conversation, this is usually a different way I start. I only ask on occasion, what has been the highlight of your day thus far?
The highlight of my day today? What happened today? There was there were a couple of cracks of daylight in my meetings, which was super nice. It's always nice to have that when it's properly spring in New York and one can go outside. And even though I just did the 5-borough bike tour, a 40-mile ride around the city yesterday, I decided I was going to get back on the horse and ride into the office, which was well worth it given the weather. I'm maybe in denial about how sore I'm going to be tomorrow, but hey.
That's good. I haven't been I took 3 or 4 days off of the gym, and I've been doing a lot of chest exercises. And as I get closer and closer to 40, which one of my friends reminded me of on this past Friday when we went out for drinks, they were like, "Oh yeah, we're getting closer to 40," and I was like, "Oh, that hangover is going to be there tomorrow." That, and I'm sore from all of the working out, so it's like both things at the same time.
Yeah, I don't think I properly knew what a hangover was until I was over 40. But yeah, I'm definitely not like a full-on lycra-clad cycling enthusiast. I'm more of it's my sort of primary mode around the city. I don't know if I'd say that, and I think New York's bicycle infrastructure has a lot of ways to go, but we're much better than we used to be when I moved here.
Well, thank you. That's great. It's good to have, kind of enjoy those little peaks of sunlight, those cracks of sunlight, So I did the sort of sparse intro, and I want to kind of start talking a bit about some of your early fascination and interest in journalism and writing, and ultimately how some of those early experiences shaped where you're at and where you're at now, with Dwell magazine. Talk about that a bit, sort of that career trajectory and some of those early experiences.
I mean, it's almost a cliche to say it's totally accidental, but I definitely didn't, I definitely wasn't studying communications as an undergrad and applying to J school and things like that. I'm ridiculously unqualified for this job, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have always gravitated toward cultural production, the people who do it, people making interesting stuff. That's pretty much it. And so, I, as an undergrad, studied literature, but with a, art history minor, but this was at the New School. Shout out to the New School. So I took a lot of design history courses, sort of cross-listed with Parsons as well. And so that's where I sort of became aware of design as a discipline. I'd always sort of, understood, when I was a little kid, I was fascinated by architecture. I'm one of those kids who wanted to be an architect when they grew up. And so, yeah, I don't know. I finished school and I basically sold coffee and went to rock shows for years. That's what I did before school too. But that led to, I thought maybe I would go in an academic route. I was really, interested in kind of the history and theory of the stuff, the history and theory is sort of weighing on the stuff that people were making now. But I couldn't imagine myself holed up in the library for the next next 6 years. And then like, and my friends who are in academia, like sort of watching their sort of career unfold, I was just like, wow, is this the hustle that I want? So I think my metabolism was like a little too fast for it. So eventually I gravitated toward journalism just because I started writing nickel and dime art reviews and other things, and just kind of got a bug for like, oh, someone's going to pay me, not very much. Someone's going to pay me to go see something interesting right now and explain to whoever's reading this, like why I think it's worth their time. And so like that ability to kind of narrate my own kind of adventures, looking at exciting things, was really what brought me into the field. I started out covering visual art with a focus on the digital media, and this was in the mid-aughts, so there wasn't a long history yet of the internet and what art meant on the internet, and how people were consuming that, preserving it, but also using the conventions of like this relatively new technology to make work. And I was just fascinated by like how someone was sort of translating things that were already like, artifacts, even though they were only 10 years old, into like kind of a new vocabulary for making work. So yeah, I was a staff writer at Rhizome, the new museum's digital media art portal, for a little bit in the mid-aughts. But so it was really kind of roundabout that I came to writing about design and architecture. I guess the most sort of relevant experience there was jumping on board at Architectural Record, a very sort of long-standing, the longest-standing architecture publication out there, and which is sort of funny. This completely naive kid going into like this really august institution, but had some really like awesome editors there who were like willing to coach and willing to put up with my lack of understanding of how a building stands up, and that really became, I never studied this in any formal way. I'm not at all like sort of connected to the grad school networks of the trained designers or the trained design academics and things like that. But I did learn a lot and meet a lot of people in practice doing that job and actually going to see work in the real world. So I hope I've, become something of an advocate for the lay person who's like arriving and seeing whatever the space is and telling you what it's like to be there. That seems so fundamental, but like so much writing about architecture is not that.
That's great. And thank you for walking us through that a little bit. And this is a nice sort of follow-up question to it. So chiefly, I'm being very punny and very corny here. Chiefly, what does the role of the editor-in-chief at Dwell entail? What do your like main responsibilities entail? And, like, how do you view like what your role with the magazine is?
Yeah, sure. I've, put together a pretty amazing team. First and foremost, like, it's really about sort of bringing in people who are going to bring in the perspectives that, that you think are worth putting in front of your readership. In front of your audience. So from obviously, photo and video are hugely important for us to, all kinds of stories that we're telling, like, whether it's at a grand scope or it's short post on the site in a given day. Like, we have a really awesome batch of people who are making it happen. That sounds very golly gosh, but it is absolutely true. Like, that more than anything else that I do in a given day is like the most important. I'm definitely not the sort of cliched editor-in-chief making sort of top-down decisions about what's going to be in the book, what's going to be on the site and on a given day. I, am more hopefully facilitating conversations among people who all have very, very different perspectives on what this should be, and helping to synthesize, referee, I don't know, whatever needs to be done to put together like really great packages. So, really like my chief responsibility is making sure that we have like the best team possible, and helping them do really, really good work. Then there's a lot of boring administration as well, but that's the part that I like about it is that. But that's sort of my day to day, and thinking about what we're making in a editorial way in terms of forthcoming packages, forthcoming issues, what kind of media those look best in. We have a really rad group of marketing people who have really built up some great channels for all sorts of audiences, from people who are a little bit on the periphery, just getting into what we do, to people who are hardcore Dwell fans, and figuring out how what we do will resonate with each of those audiences. So, thinking about how what we're producing editorially works, but also like the medium in which someone's going to consume it. Like I've, uh, always been interested in contemporary technologies, and I think it's foolish to think that you can run an editorial department without thinking about the end product. Whether that's from the UX side or from the engineering side, like working in lockstep is really important. Like our engineering roadmap lines up with our editorial roadmap, lines up with what we're doing on the marketing side, so that we know that we're putting, we're not just making this editorial in a vacuum. We're doing it in a way that is going to reach people on a platform that's well tailored to the type of content that we're creating. It's a really boring answer, but that's that's I spend my time thinking about that.
No, I think it like makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate you sharing that. And which it kind of brings you to these sort of other like smaller bullet points in there, and I'm definitely going to ask about sort of the mission, because I think there's always sort of a mission there, and then like how we kind of get there and what that might change and what that might look like. When I look at like what I'm doing here, let's say in the first 50 episodes, right, of this podcast, 50 installments of this podcast, if I really stay super rigid to what I was doing of this is purely Baltimore, we and you wouldn't be having this conversation, and being able to kind of grow it, but still stay within, I guess, a brand and with the ultimate like spirit of what I'm doing. It's like, I want to talk to people who are doing interesting work and really get a sense of like, all right, what's happening here? Maybe someone will learn from it. And, all I know is when I go to certain places, like in Baltimore, I just keep seeing like magazine in there. I'm like, I got to talk to that guy. I got to talk to the developer. I got to make these conversations happen. That's really what it is, to at least extend and broaden those conversations and broaden the creative community, like being able to connect those dots. That's ultimately what the mission of what I'm doing has grown into, has developed into.
That's one of the reasons that I was excited to see that you reached out. I really like the fact that you're going and at it independently, and that you're not beholden to old ways of doing things, and that you can think about your audience in a way that isn't saddled with the baggage that some of the large publishers or networks would necessarily come with. So that's exciting. So I was happy to see that you reached out.
Thank you so much. That's really it's really cool to hear. So tell me about like and it may vary day to day, obviously in a week, but tell me about like what a typical like first 30 minutes of the day for you looks like. Is it just like driving or biking, or I'm like yelling at the coffee machine? What does that first 30 minutes of the workday look like for you?
Oh, wow. I am not like an early rising, get up, go to the gym, whatever sort of person. I stay up late and I wake up late. I eventually groggily make my way to the coffee maker while checking some combination of Slacks and emails and whatever Twitter is throwing my way that morning. I kind of quit Twitter almost cold turkey in 2016, but obviously I'm still there. But these kind of things, like rather, I guess everything that contemporary life throws at us in the morning, I suppose I try to get in a single dose, and then I mean, it's usually on to coffee, first of many throughout the day. I think the first of many throughout the day, and then I usually am doing like just kind of organizational stuff. It's when I take on like most of the admin things, then is meetings for the next 8 hours, and then I'll usually work for like whatever do the actual creative things in the evening after I'm done with dropping into various conversations about things going on at the company, both editorially and otherwise. So it's it's really an interesting Yeah, I'm not like the sort of person who's like, well, the first thing that I do is like whatever, make some smoothie you should know about or something. Like I don't, but yeah, I don't know. Coffee, internet, proceed with the rest of the day.
And as you take a sip from the mug, I like
Oh
that.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, I should caveat that it's like 5:30 in the evening too.
And so as far as, and maybe it might be the wrong nomenclature here, but as far as the sort of like editorial cycle, right? Like, what is the most exciting part of that cycle for you? Is it, sort of those introductory meetings of this is what we want to cover for the next quarter, next month, or whatever that cadence sort of looks like? Or is it like, here's these nerves, this excited energy, we got everything going, everything is rolling? Like, tell me about that.
I mean, it's really, um, I mean, it's really when we're in the early stages of a project, maybe we have like a theme or an idea like picked out, but then we're sitting in a meeting and someone just comes in with like this person or story or house somewhere that just seems to come completely out of nowhere. It's sort of like whoa, where'd you get that kind of moment? Like it's very we're not locked into something like covering luxury high design or like celebrities and things like that. So we have a pretty wide field of things that we can play with from a storytelling point of view. So I'm always encouraging everyone to go out there and like find relatively obscure things, like what's going on in X part of the world. Like, and when someone comes back with like something truly amazing, like young firms that they don't have PR, they don't have like, they're building interesting stuff. I love to see that from like an architecture side, or like, some person who, has this great story about their own life that affects the way that we might think about homes in general, or our own homes specifically. Like, really when someone comes back with something that has a really awesome idea at its core, like, we can build a lot around that. So, that's my favorite moment, when like we're all sitting there and like I just have this like jaw drop moment. Again, like putting together the team is like the most important thing, like because everybody has different specializations, different expertise, and like different people and places that they know about. So it's really cool when something truly surprising but also really, really relevant comes in.
That's fantastic. I am starting to think more and more. I ended up applying for becoming a member of the National Association of Black Journalists. So I've been trying to think more and more like a journalist, and more like, okay, you're kind of the full guy here. You know what I mean? And it's like, what's your production schedule? Who are you want to talk to? What are the themes and so on? And some of those moments when you have a theme, like I did this month in April, I did this jazz appreciation month, and I tried to tailor a lot of the interviews in that way. And some of the interviews, they were like held specifically to be released during that month, and some were like a little later. And it's like, I got to do it, I got to make it happen. And one included going down to New Orleans and getting an interview with the curator from the Jazz Museum. And I was like, this was unexpected. And I was like super excited and super jazzed. I was like, this is going to fit in so well. But I'm definitely a person that was trying to have a plan. Like, I know 2 months out, these are the interviews, they're done, but it's just still having that flexibility of recording in batch. And I was just like, this trip, this traffic, not getting my coffee on time, none of that makes sense. None of it I care about. But getting this interview had me so excited. Just was like, this is great. This is what I'm doing this for. So sort of this blend of having a production calendar and kind of thinking through things, but also being able to have that flexibility to wedge something in there that fits like so perfectly.
Yeah, I mean it's the discovery is the fun part, right? I mean that's yeah, I mean if you're dedicating yourself to finding people doing exciting work in the space that you're interested in, like, that's the big payoff, is like, oh, this person's thinking about this way differently than I thought, or like the experience of whatever this person's doing just like totally made me reconsider some aspect of something that I think I know really well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So talk about a little bit of the sort of like core values at Dwell, and like how, the work now, or how your efforts and your team's efforts are working towards like that goal, and as you know, it evolves, how you're working towards that goal, those core values.
Sure. I mean, I detest orthodoxy, and we have as many core values as we have people on the team. You know, at the end of the day, this is, this the most successful products that we create are the results of like not having a hard line in terms of what we think is good or not, whether that's in terms of, style or some other aspect of a story. I'll give you the bullet points, in terms of like what we're trying to do here. I mean, Dwell is a magazine that in some ways are in one way, Dwell is a magazine that in some particular ways is rooted in 20th century modernism, particularly a Californian strain of 20th century modernism. And, that was sort of radical in its early days, I guess, like in the McMansion 90s when all the boomers were building, giant houses in far-flung parts of the exurbs, like, or at least that was getting to be the thing. A younger generation had an appreciation for this, work that, like the sort of mid-century house that was, kind of, I don't know. I mean, it seemed a little outre, even a little kitschy, maybe even like, those houses probably seemed a little depressing too, in many ways at that point. But you could, find them and buy them relatively inexpensively, and the renovation could become a labor of love, in terms of telling the story and kind of mythologizing this era and contextualizing this kind of space in that era. And as a student, I thought that was amazing. Like that's a very, very cool thing to be looking at and to be taking seriously, and in that way. And then at the same time, like I also love the kind of the like totally crazy nature of the magazine in its first couple of years. I mean, the first issue is literally someone sitting in front of their house, which is like just like a black cube. It might not be a cube. It's like a black box looking thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what I reacted to in that, I didn't see that until many years later when I was like doing research, but I was certainly aware of the brand when I was younger. And like, that's like, okay, that is I may never want to replicate that for myself, but that like has introduced me to a sense of what's possible, like what a home can be, what it could be. That was a particularly like the formal example, but the magazine always championed things that like, had some core idea that, pushed at the edges of an idea of what pushed at the edges of what a poem can or should be. And I hope we're carrying that through. I hope we're carrying that sense of introducing new possibilities to the audience, whether or not you'd ever want to do it yourself. Like, so, and then, I mean, I always say that we sort of look to that 20th century modernism and, kind of throw out the stylistic part and think about, what is a contemporary version of some of the values that underpinned it. Like, first and foremost, we're focused on the humanistic aspect of design. How is this, how is this either solving a problem or framing the life of an actual person? This is not architecture as sculpture in a vacuum, as some design magazines out there will show it. This is about someone and the place where they live and the design decisions that went into their being able to live there. It's one sec.
Thanks. Yeah.
And the design decisions that went into their being able to make that a reality. Then, there's something progressive about it in the sense of wanting to champion work that is forward-looking, not only in the sense of forward-looking in the sense of anticipating what the future of this site is. That could be, ecological. We talk a lot about, climate change and how we are building for climate change, how we were thinking about how climate change is going to change is going to alter where we can, should, or could build something, or the way that it fits into the socio-political context of where it is. Like, this is, a question of affordability in most parts of the United States right now. Like, does this house, have a idea behind it that could relate to, the anxieties of someone trying to find a place to live right now. I mean, like at a moment when no one under 40 can afford to buy a house, what does dwell mean, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's existential for us, and it's a question that I want to use as a motivating factor for finding really interesting ways of both kind of putting hacks together to afford something right now, but also people who are people from politicians to developers to architects to ingenious residents, coming up with ways to live affordably or build affordably in contemporary climate. And so, I mean, that's definitely like a consideration that looms large for us. And then finally, there's a sense of optimism, right? I mean, this, we're not like wringing our hands about these things so much as presenting possibilities for how design could make your life better, like just fundamentally. And that, is something that I want to, I hope that the brand expresses even when we're talking about really tough stuff. Like, I hope that the brand still expresses and a certain brightness, a certain idea that like design can make this better. And that's sort of what I'd like to be our particular angle on a story about a home that you don't necessarily find anywhere else. And hopefully not like, and an optimism that's sincere, not an optimism that is, I don't know, whatever, an Instagram lifestyle version of optimism.
That was a great way of putting it at the end right there. I like that.
Well, so yeah, I mean, I don't, not every story that we publish adheres to each one of these things, perfectly, but it's, certainly the criteria that we like when we squint at something, we, apply. And then within that, I've really been trying to take us away from our association with 20th century modernism and look at contemporary design through a lens of, and look at contemporary design through a, I want us to show a range of styles, household configurations, different geographies, different budgets, different scales. Like I'd like, whether it's a week on the website or an issue of the magazine, for there to be a surprising mix of different types of homes and different ways of living. You might have a giant budget thing that's really on the edge of energy efficiency, sustainability, and required a lot of resources to do that R&D, or you have something that's just an ingenious, like relatively inexpensive home that required a really clever resident or a really clever designer to pull it off. So I want us to make sure that we're showing a huge range of things. I'm not allergic to a little decor. I mean, I'm an arch minimalist, but like I'm not allergic to crown molding, but I just want to be sure that there's a surprising range of things, and I hope the next thing you see is not at all like the last.
That's really, it's really good. It's really good. And I think the funny thing is in that answer, you answered like two other questions in that. So like you're like multitasking here. So shout out to you.
I used to be
checking things off.
I'm used to asking the questions. I'm extraordinarily uncomfortable talking about what we're up to, but I'll grill you on what's next with the podcast later.
I'm here for it. So I got two like sort of like last real questions, and then I have a few rapid fire questions. They're fun questions. No need to. That's actually the fun part, or as someone described it, the BS part of the podcast. So it'll be fun.
I'm terrified.
So I'm reading like, and I actually, when you were describing that first issue, I was like, wow, that is the black house. That is the black building right there. And that's like what, October 2000. So Dwell's been around for like over 20 years. So like, how has the like publication evolved? And you were touching on it definitely. How's the publication evolved over time, and like, where do you see it, kind of shifting in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years?
Well, I don't want to speak for any of the, previous editors. They all had really strong and exciting ideas about, where this publication could or should go. And I haven't really talked with many of them about like what that actually looked like behind the scenes. So, I don't want to speak to the earlier history, but, if Dwell has always been associated with a certain type of house, I'll, like a box on a rock somewhere, like, these sort of like glassy modernist homes and beautiful sites, or like, just there's a stylistic vocabulary that I think we have unfairly, to a degree, become associated with if you look back through some of those issues. But because we were early champions of that kind of work and its resurgence in the early 2000s, I think, we have, for better or worse, become associated with it. It was an awesome Tumblr called Unhappy Hipsters in like the late aughts. And it's, all of these sort of bleak captions underneath the like, photos of people in various states of semi-artificial looking day-to-day life in their homes, from the pages of Dwell. And it just like, it's sort of, I would love to ask, the team from the time what it was like when that like landed, because it would just be so validating. It's like you didn't have people in architectural photography in any meaningful way. There was some blurry person for scale, maybe, but like there wasn't someone like, there wasn't someone actually interacting with the house in the way that they might on a normal day. And I hope that we're, really pushing at that, at that sense of this is how this space is inhabited. Go back and in that first issue, read the first editor's letter by Carrie Jacobs, the Fruit Bowl Manifesto. It is wonderful, a wonderful invective against overly staged, decorous photography. But anyway, that's a North Star that we look to a lot. But yeah, so I mean, in terms of like in terms of what we tried to do, again, I've tried to preserve a lot of that. I've tried to preserve, certainly our photography is a little different from what you would see in a traditional architectural magazine or a more sort of celebrity lifestyle magazine or something like that. We shoot with a lot of documentary photographers, portrait photographers, people who, don't necessarily look at the space from a designer's point of view, but look at the space ideally as like a guest at a dinner party, right? Like you just redid your living room and I've come over and this is the grand tour. And so I'm hoping that our images have like a little bit more dirt under their fingernails, and we have an awesome creative team who's kind of assuring that we have the right photographers for the narrative as well. Like, how do we capture the experience of getting invited to that dinner party for our audience? Not so much like translating the architect's vision to image, but to get a sense of what it's actually like to be there. And we push on that in our writing as well. Like I don't want to know how the building stands up. We can get an explanation for that, but I want to know like what the kitchen smells like in the morning. Like that's the sort of like, bring me to this space. So, again, hopefully we've been able to cultivate that and use that to show a much broader range of projects and cover a much broader range of topics than, you've seen in Dwell, certainly in, that you've seen in Dwell historically or for a while, but or just doing it in a different way. And so I expect us to continue on that trajectory. We really have emphasized work by emerging designers and other parts of the world that aren't necessarily on the radar of a lot of other shelter titles. It's sort of younger people who don't have a sort of media savvy apparatus promoting their work. So that legwork, again, finding that discovery is wonderful. And then also tackling issues and ideas related to home and housing in a way that that approaches it with that optimism, like that, with that sense that design can help here, and that has really informed a lot of what we've done. And it's also something that I can see us doing more and more of in the future, but treating it in a way that we just did a story about tiny home communities for people who were formerly lacked housing in Oregon. And, often you'll see cheery renderings and images from the ribbon cutting of these. I think most of it was transitional housing. You'll have to look at the piece. But, we, wanted to show what it's like to live there. So we said like, okay, like, does this work? What's the, like, or like, what does work mean? Right? Like, does this, like, what is it like to inhabit one of these spaces? And so we, had a writer and a photographer go chat with people who live in different tiny home communities about their lives and what this has meant in terms of how they live and what life inside the community is like. And it was but telling that, but it basically functions the same as the tour of any house that we've done in the magazine. It just has a much different context and than what you might think of as a typical dwell home tour. Or we just did a piece about an indigenous community in California establishing a land trust to hopefully assure that housing remains affordable in their community. That's another one. You should definitely check that one out. It's a really interesting, their situation is really, really specific, but you could see the way that they are using this land trust being applicable to all sorts of communities around the United States.
That's great. And, just think that changing, I guess from what I'm taking in, like kind of like changing how like information is being disseminated, how like this is an interesting story that might fall slightly outside of what it's been or what it's been known for, as far as the magazine goes and how, but it's like we're still in the same vein. We're still sort of having, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we are fundamentally still showing really exciting architecture, but I want it to be I don't want it to be pure fantasy. It's fun. It's fun to dream about like, hey, this space exists. That's amazing. And I don't want to take away. Hopefully, we're an extremely entertaining read as well. But like and you can indulge in a little fantasy. Whether it's again, whether you'd actually want to live there or you'd never want to, but it presents something that's interesting and exciting for you. But at the same time, I want that to be rooted in the realities of like what home means, especially in the United States right now. And so, but again, covering that in a way that's different from like covering that in a way that is different from how it might be in a news context or how it might be in an academic context or a political or a feature focus more on the political dynamics. I want it to really be about like this is about housing, this is about like home design, and this is a consideration that hopefully contextualizes everything else that we like put out there.
Yeah, and one of the things like I walk almost everywhere that I go, whether it's here in Baltimore, and if I see something that looks really cool on the outside, it's like, wow, I wonder what the people like. Who are the people that live there? How do they live? What do they do there? And that's what I was hearing. In part, like some of those questions would be answered, like the tiny house scenario you were describing. I mean, I'm a monster of a person, so I was like, I want to see how they fit in there. I want to see how that works out for them. Like, I'm really tall and really wide, so it's just like I'm not going to fit in here.
I mean, look, there are certain types that maybe we're complicit in helping to popularize, but like prefab is not a type of home. It is not a style of home. It is a construction method that has lots of different permutations and may or may not make sense for your context. Or like or tiny houses. Like I don't know. I mean, it's I live in Brooklyn. I don't have a lot of square footage, and like what qualifies as a tiny house on some of these television programs that I won't name is pretty hilarious by comparison. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, presenting we never want to present anything as like an ideal lifestyle or anything like that. So it's more about like this is what's possible out there, and like I never want to fetishize one particular type of home, even though like being known as the magazine that does this like is it could be commercially successful. I think well, we're commercially successful, and I think we're commercially successful because we do a variety of things and keep people interested and excited. But the versus championing like a specific type of house, or hopefully championing a variety of things. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have particular opinions on like the tiny house as a type, or any other things that crop up. I believe that they are very, very useful in some contexts and fit your life in some contexts, and are not a solution to every, like, do I believe in smaller homes over and against like McMansion bloat? Of course. But that doesn't mean 220 square feet, like the for everybody. Some people that's great. I personally would probably not spend a lot of time living in a van, but I know a lot of people that do, and we want to tell their stories, without being, without fetishizing that, right? Without, hashtag van life. Like, this is like, okay, you're particularly interesting among the many people that do this. We're going to talk about your thing. So I don't know. And in the same way, like, if we have something that is like, really architecturally daring, like, there has to be a story behind that. I really don't want like, hey, this wealthy person contracted this superstar architect to build some sculptural form on their property. Like, I'm not saying we wouldn't cover that, but there'd have to be an idea there. There'd have to be a story behind it that's more complicated or more exciting than that. So whether it's whatever, a tiny house, or like some whatever, some scare quotes architectural masterpiece, like there has to be like a good story and like something to for the reader to hook onto that they can relate to, again, whether they'd want to live that way or not.
That's great. Thank you. And interestingly enough, that you've did the daily double yet again. You've answered two questions in that bit, so that's a good space for us to stop with the real questions.
Okay.
We can actually move into these rapid fire questions now, and I'll give you the sort of disclaimer or whatever that I give everyone. Don't overthink them. They're goofy questions. They're fun, but they're goofy questions. What is your so I got, like I said, four of them. Could you name three tools, like I'm thinking apps here, but define tools how you define them. Name three tools that you use daily.
That I enjoy using daily, or that like
Sure. Actually, you know what? Let's go that route. Let's go that route. That's great.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about all of the things that I use daily. But I don't know, like that I think are particularly brilliant. I'm like looking at my phone now, and I guess I'm going to limit this to apps. And not going to giggle at your question, but yeah, I don't know, Slack, Instagram, and that's my like generational thing too, right? I'm like solidly Instagram. I'm not a TikTok person. Although like, I mean, obviously, I'm a little obsessed with DIY furniture hacks on TikTok though, like especially the more Baroque and adaptation of some like found or thrifted piece that people come up with. But and what else what else do I use all the time? I don't know, the weather app. I'm really I mean, Spotify, I'm a bit of like I've never written about music, but I'm a bit of a like pop music like enthusiast, let's say. I was like I was and still am like a record crate digger. So like I love getting mad at the Spotify algorithm. It's just like, you think that's related to that? I have a friend who used to work there completely independently of any kind of programming that would have an influence on how that algorithm works. And I used to just text him to complain all the time when the algorithm got it completely wrong. Like, you can do something about this, right? But anyway, those are really boring answers, very conventional answers. But those are probably the three tools that I use every day. Could I live without them? Ideally.
No, that's great, and it actually slides into this next one because I heard music. I think earlier you were talking, so I have a music related question. If there was what would you say, like, if you go through that Spotify right now, right?
You don't want to
know. What are the last three liked songs that you have?
Well, I like things just to save them. I don't necessarily like them just
Don't we all?
like them. what are the things where I'm like, oh, that's really good? Oh wow. When did if I go through genres, like kind of uh 60s garage rock, funk and soul, like
Thanks.
uh that trifecta looms large. A lot of, yeah, I guess like late 70s and 80s post punk, but that's kind of a cliche. What's really good? Been listening to a lot of I've been listening to a lot of like, I don't know, like classic house music lately. It's not something I was like such a like indie rock kid and like a hardcore kid in the 90s that like I kind of missed a lot of dance music from then, and like it's I mean, it's obviously pretty ambient in the culture, but like I like have never really dug in that direction. So there's a lot of that in there now too. I looking at some of this though, like I can't name like, oh, what did that sound like? I just am like an obsessive like, oh, this is really good. Oh, this is really good. So I will wander around New York City with like, random Spotify rabbit holes, and snag things. But if there are three sort of like touchstone genres, those are probably it.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you. See, I use this rapid fire portion. People think it's me like diving in and trying to learn more about the person, which in a sense it is, but also it's me stealing. Like, all right, what song again? Let me
Oh,
put
well, I can follow up like which I actually think were good or which was like, wow, I can't believe this exists. I'm never listening to that again.
I was I really got into this it was funny because my partner, she saw me, she's like, why are you dancing? I was like, I'm listening to this vaporwave musician named Barb Walters. She,
Okay.
you're having way too much fun. I was like, look, it's fine. It's fine. Let me just be me.
Just like wash the dishes and like down these like rabbit holes of like genres that like I never really like thought I would find myself murking around in, but or within the murk of.
What is your in because design, art, all of that stuff, I know it's going to be a pluralization, that's not a word, but pluralization of this question, but what is your favorite color?
Oh, funny. Blue.
Okay, because usually people say, oh, here's my three. I was like, I said one, I said color, not
Okay.
colors.
Definitive. Yeah, I'll say 100%.
Okay,
I stand by it.
I dig it. This is the last one. You said you have like the sort of like waking up late, going to sleep late. So in that, I am definitely curious as to like what my guests eat. I like to get into their lives. Like what is that, late night meal for you? It doesn't have to be healthy. It just has to be good. What is that meal for you?
I don't really eat late night. I like, but what do I mean, I don't really eat late night, but by comparison to most normal people, I probably eat later than most. But I don't know. I like what is a real go-to? I guess like, I'm not talking about like the desert island food, but like, I live in New York. I have like a particular like chip on my shoulder about pizza anywhere else. And so like, and I happen to live near one of probably what I would call the best New York pizza place in New York. And that would annoy a lot of people, but a lot of people would also have my back should I have that argument. But yeah, that's kind of my like, I mean, that's kind of, I don't know. I like but like on the fancier end, like I don't know, you could stick with pizza and talk about like, bougie Neapolitan style, like pizza in a well-designed room with like, I don't know, good cocktails. Like, I mean, it's really, maybe it's more about like what the space looks like than what I'm actually eating. Like, it's sort of, I put a lot of weight into like where I find myself. Not like, like, oh, I have to, go see. But in fact, like, I'm certainly not the person to tell you what's cool or interesting right now. But like, I do like have a real sense of my own identity and constitution based on like the space that I'm in. So like like I don't know, in the like it just has an extreme influence on my mood and understanding of who I am and what I'm doing. I guess that's not super unusual, but reflecting on it now, it's like, oh, maybe that's why I do this. I'm just like, too bound up in my surroundings or something like that. But I'm being really unarticulate about this, so I'm going to stop answering this question now.
So I heard pizza.
Yep, pizza, 100%. Love pizza. Love pizza. Love New York style. Like, there's a particular I have a particular set of criteria. It is like, I don't know. It is something that I would find it challenging to leave behind should I move away from the city. Although maybe that would just make the sort of acute pang of wanting it late at night all the greater when I returned.
That was one of the best answers, though. It's like all of these other considerations. It's like it's still pizza, but all these. I mean, I kind of do the same thing as to be very colloquial about it. I was like, I don't do raggedy shit. That's literally what my vibe is. Like, it better be good, but I don't do the raggedy thing. I don't do that.
Yeah. I'm not like I don't know. I'm not like oh my God, I just want like, a classic, like some sort of fast food chain or whatever, like that sparks a sort of a youthful nostalgia. I like just like gross. But except for a slice shop, like that's the thing. I mean, which I suppose is like, on the health scale, probably not all that much better for you, but I believe it also has like a greater, I don't know, there's a there's a cultural importance that goes along with that slice that's very different than other things. Again, that sounds pizza. The answer is pizza.
That is great. And with that, that's pretty much it for me. I'm done roasting you with all of my questions and just throwing them at you and seeing if you can deflect them. And you won. You won. So with that, one, I want to thank you so much for making the time to hop on this podcast and chat with me this afternoon, evening situation. And two, I want to invite and encourage you to share with the listeners in these final moments, anything you want to share, like sort of like, your final thoughts here. And then please include social media, website, all that good stuff, for folks to check things out online. So the floor is yours.
Okay, well, Rob, thank you so much for reaching out. I mean, again, like I'm a huge advocate for people going it alone and doing, independent work and, growing in a way that works for them and doesn't sort of plug into established old models that are dying off anyway. With that in mind, follow us at Dwell, wherever you can find at Dwell Magazine and at Dwell and dwell.com and Dwell.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank William Hanley for coming on to the podcast, Dwell Magazine. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, design, interesting conversations in and around your neck of the woods. You just got to look for it.